Who was I without him? Who had Simone been before she became Mrs. Elijah Vance? The memories of my youth seemed to belong to another person. The girl who wanted to be a painter, who had won a scholarship to study in Paris, who had turned it down because Elijah had convinced her that starting a family was more important. The art will always be there, he'd said then, with that smile that melted my defenses. But the time for children won't, and I had believed him. I had packed away my brushes, traded canvases for diapers, and galleries for parent-teacher conferences. I didn't regret my children. Amara and Jamal were the best things in my life. But what had become of Simone, the artist? She had completely dissolved into Simone, the wife. The next day, while Elijah was at his real office, or perhaps his parallel life, I couldn't be sure anymore. I went up to the attic. There, in dust-covered boxes, I found my old art supplies. The brushes were stiff, the paints dry, but the sketches were still there, a testament to a talent I had abandoned for love, or what I had believed was love. I also found letters, photographs, and memories of our life together, our wedding with Elijah promising before God, and 200 guests that he would be faithful until death. Amara's birth, Elijah crying as he cut the umbilical cord, Jamal taking his first steps, Elijah filming it with that old camera he loved so much. Real moments, genuine emotions, or so I had believed. When had the lie begun? My phone rang. It was Amara. "Mom, are you okay? I've noticed you've been acting weird lately." My daughter always so perceptive. "I'm fine, honey. Just a little tired." "Are you sure? I can stop by if you want. The kids are asking for grandma." The kids? My grandchildren. Elijah's official grandchildren. I wondered if they knew they had an uncle and a little aunt in that blue house. Siblings they would never meet. The web of lies spread like a poisonous tapestry, touching innocent lives. "Sunday is better," I replied. "Dad will be home." A lie. On Sunday afternoons, Elijah had golf with clients. Now I knew it was likely family time at the Blue House. After hanging up, I returned to my investigation. The bank statements I had ignored for years now made sense. Regular transfers to an account I didn't recognize. Purchases at stores we never frequented. Medical expenses that didn't match any of our illnesses. Elijah had been maintaining 2 homes, 2 complete lives. And I had been too trusting, too comfortable in my ignorance to notice. I found invoices for private academy tuition, music classes, and summer camps. Jalen played the violin. The baby, whose name I still didn't know, had been born at Emory University Hospital, the same one where our children were born. The audacity of the deception was almost admirable in its brazenness. That afternoon, I did something I had never done. I hired a private investigator, a discreet man recommended by a friend who had gone through a difficult divorce. "I need to know everything," I told him. "How long? How did it start?" "Everything." "Are you sure you want to know everything?" he asked, his voice heavy with experience in shattering lives with the truth. "Yes," I replied, though I wasn't sure of anything except that I couldn't keep living in this play. Elijah came home that night with flowers. Calla lilies, my favorite, or the favorites of the Simone he thought I was. I no longer knew what I genuinely liked, what preferences were mine, and which ones I had adopted to please him. "You look beautiful," he said during dinner, taking my hand. The private investigator, a man named Agent Strolling, with tired eyes that had seen too many secrets, came to the house a week later. Elijah was on one of his business trips. That is playing happy family in the Blue House. Sterling laid a folder on my dining room table, the same table where we had celebrated 40 Christmases, 40 birthdays, a lifetime of lies. "Mrs. Vance, what I'm about to show you is not easy to digest," he warned, his voice professionally compassionate. "Are you sure you want to continue?" I nodded, my hands trembling as I opened the folder. The first page was a marriage certificate. Marcus Stanton had married Candace Stanton 12 years ago. Marriage, not an affair, not a mistress, but another wife. But this is illegal, I stammered, my mind struggling to process the information. Technically, yes, Sterling replied. He used false documents, an alternate identity he has perfectly maintained for years. Elijah Vance and Marcus Stanton are the same person, but legally they exist as two different individuals. It's a professional job, ma'am. Your husband is no amateur at this. The following pages were worse. Photographs of Elijah and Candace's wedding. An intimate ceremony on a beach. She was in a simple white linen dress. He with that smile I thought I knew so well. Birth certificates. Jalen Stanton, born 11 years ago. 3 months after Elijah had an emergency medical conference in San Diego. Sky Stanton, the baby, born 7 months ago, when Elijah was on a corporate leadership retreat. There's more, Sterling said, moving to another section. Your husband owns properties under his alternate identity. The house where the other family lives, a condo in Miami, a cabin in the Smoky Mountains, all paid for in cash with no suspicious mortgages. My inheritance, my mother's inheritance, which she had left me 15 years ago. A considerable sum that Elijah had wisely invested for our retirement. Now I knew where that money had truly gone. He had funded his other life with my dead mother's money. How is this possible? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. How can someone live like this for so long? Sterling shrugged. I've seen similar cases, though none so elaborate. Your husband manages 2 businesses, one under each name. The second is a consulting firm that justifies his additional income and absences. It's brilliant in a twisted way. I continued reading school records for Jalen, an excellent student, captain of the youth soccer team, medical reports for Candace, fertility treatments Elijah had paid for years before she could conceive. They had struggled to have children, just like us at first. The irony was venomous. There's one more thing you should know, Sterling said, clearly uncomfortable. The other woman, Candace, she doesn't know about you. To her, her husband is a widower. The story he told her is that his first wife, Simone, died in a car accident 15 years ago. I was dead. In Elijah's narrative for his other family, I was dead. He had metaphorically killed his wife, so he could have another. I wondered if he ever thought of the dead wife sleeping in another house, in another life, while he made love to Candace. Is there anything about why? I asked, needing to understand the motivation behind such elaboration. Sterling pulled out another file. I discreetly interviewed some acquaintances from both circles. Apparently, your husband met Candace when she was his physical therapist after his knee surgery. The knee surgery. I remembered those months perfectly. Elijah complaining of pain, going to therapy 3 times a week, slowly recovering. I had been busy caring for my sick mother then, trusting him to follow his treatment alone. He had planted the seeds of his other life while I held my dying mother's hand. Candace became pregnant shortly after. Sterling continued. Based on the dates, it seems your husband decided to maintain both lives instead of choosing. Maybe because of the children, maybe because of the finances, maybe because he could. The financial documents suggest he handles nearly $3 million in assets between both identities. $3 million, money I had inherited, earned, stolen, perhaps to maintain his empire of lies. I stood up abruptly, running to the bathroom where I vomited until there was nothing left but bile. Sterling waited patiently, professionally, until the end. What do you want to do with this information? He asked when I returned. I need time to think. Can you get me more information about his finances? Everything. Every account. Every investment. Every single cent. Of course. Are you considering a divorce? I'm considering justice, I replied, surprised by the coldness of my voice. I spent the next 3 days in a hotel, telling Elijah I was visiting my sister in Chicago. I needed space to think, to plan. to decide who Simone would be after this. In the solitude of that impersonal room, with Sterling's folders spread across the bed, like evidence of a crime, I made the decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to be a victim. I wasn't going to cry silently while Elijah continued his double life. I wasn't going to disappear discreetly with a silent divorce that allowed him to keep his facade. I was going to systematically destroy the house of cards he had built. But I would do it with a surgeon's precision, not a scorned wife's fury. First, I needed allies. I called Jamal, my son, who was a corporate law attorney. Son, I need your professional help with something delicate. Can you come to the Marriott Marquis downtown, room 5 and 12? Jamal arrived in an hour, worried. Mom, what's wrong? Why are you in a hotel? I showed him everything. I watched his face transform from confusion to disbelief, then to a cold rage that I recognized as my own. I'm going to destroy him, he finally said, his voice lethal. Bigamy is a felony, fraud, tax evasion, document forgery. I didn't interrupt. I don't want him to go to jail. I want something worse. I want him to lose everything he values, but have to live to see it. Jamal looked at me with new admiration. What do you have in mind? I laid out my plan. It was complex. It required patience, acting, and a cruelty I didn't know I possessed. Jamal listened, occasionally suggesting improvements, legal refinements that would make everything airtight. We'll need Amara too, he said. She handles public relations for that big firm. She'll know how to manage the media aspect when everything explodes. Amara reacted differently. She cried for an hour, then became enraged, then cried again. How could he? She repeated. How could he do this to us? But when she calmed down, her strategic mind took control. We need to control the narrative. When this comes out, and it will come out, we need Dad to be the undisputed villain. I also needed an unexpected ally. I called Elijah's sister, Patricia, with whom I had always had a good relationship. Patricia listened in silence as I told her everything. Then she sighed deeply. I always knew something wasn't right, she admitted. The trips, the excuses, the way he sometimes got details confused. I thought it was an affair. I never imagined this. I need access to your mother's safe deposit box, I told her. Patricia was the executive of my mother-in-law's will. Elijah keeps important documents there. Simone, Patricia said after a pause, Mom always loved you more than him. She used to say you were too good for Elijah. You'll have what you need. The plan took shape over the next few weeks. I hired a second investigator, this one specializing in financial fraud. He discovered that Elijah had been systematically evading taxes, using his double identity to conceal income. A forensic accountant traced every transaction, building a case that would make the IRS tremble. Jamal prepared legal documents not for an immediate divorce, but to freeze assets at the precise moment. Amara cultivated contacts in the media, preparing them for the story of the year. Prominent businessman, living double life for a decade. I returned home to my role as the devoted wife. Elijah suspected nothing. Why would he? He had maintained his deception for so long that arrogance had made him careless. He kissed me every morning, called me from his office every afternoon, and we made love with an enthusiasm from me that surprised him pleasantly. One night, while we were having dinner, he spoke to me about the future. I've been thinking about retirement, he said. Maybe in a few years we could travel, see the world like we always wanted. That sounds wonderful, I replied, pouring him more wine. Where would you go first? Italy maybe, or Greece. Places with history, with art. I know how much you love art. The art I gave up for you, I thought, smiling. It would be perfect. He continued talking about his dreams, our supposed plans together, unaware that I was counting the days until his destruction. The next 6 weeks were a masterpiece of performance. I became the most perfect wife Elijah had had in years. I cooked his favorite dishes. I waited up for him, no matter how late he worked. I initiated sex with an enthusiasm that delighted him. I was the Simone of our honeymoon, but with a dark purpose he couldn't imagine. "You're radiant lately," he told me one morning, hugging me from behind while I made coffee. "What's changed?" "I decided to value what we have," I replied, my voice poisoned. "Honey, life is short, don't you think?" Meanwhile, the pieces of the plan moved like clockwork. Jamal discovered that Elijah's consulting firm, as Marcus Stanton, had won several government contracts using insider information obtained from his identity as Elijah Vance. It was corporate fraud on a grand scale. Amara had planted seeds on social media, anonymous accounts that began asking questions about the mysterious Marcus Stanton and his resemblance to Elijah Vance. Nothing accusatory yet, just enough to create buzz. The financial investigator found the grand prize, a Cayman's account with $5 million money Elijah had been diverting for years. It was our money. Money from my mother's inheritance. Money from joint investments, all hidden for his eventual escape perhaps. But the masterstroke came from Patricia. In her mother's safe deposit box, she found the real will of my father-in-law, not the version Elijah had submitted. In the original, everything was left in a trust for the grandchildren with Simone, me as the administrator. Elijah had forged documents to inherit everything alone, another federal crime. One afternoon, I followed Elijah to the Blue House. This time, I didn't hide. I parked right out front and waited. I watched him get out of the car, but not like the Elijah I knew. This man walked differently, more relaxed, somehow younger. Jalen ran into his arms, and Elijah lifted him, spinning him in the air while the boy laughed. Candace came out with the baby, and the scene was so domestic, so perfect, that I finally understood. Elijah wasn't acting there. That was his real life. I was the obligation, the youthful mistake he couldn't correct. This family was what he truly wanted. The knowledge didn't hurt as I expected. Instead, it gave me clarity. I wasn't destroying a marriage. I was exposing a lie. It wasn't revenge. It was justice. That night, Elijah came home late, smelling of baby powder, and with a smudge of marinara sauce on his sleeve. Probably from dinner with his other family. "Sorry I'm late," he said, kissing me distractedly. "The meeting ran long." "No problem," I replied, noticing the child's drawing sticking out of his briefcase. "Did you eat?" "Grab something at the office," he lied easily. "But I'd love a glass of wine with you." We sat on the sofa, him talking about his fictional day, while I nodded at the appropriate moments. At one point, he rested his head in my lap, an intimate gesture from our early years. "Are you happy, Simone?" he asked suddenly. The question caught me by surprise. "Why do you ask?" "I don't know. Sometimes I feel like I've lost something, that I took a wrong turn somewhere, and I can't find my way back." It was the most honest he had been in years, and for a moment, I almost felt pity for him. Almost. "We all make choices," I replied, stroking his hair. "The important thing is living with the consequences." "I guess you're right," he sighed, closing his eyes. Jamal called me the next day. "Everything's ready. The documents are prepared. Amara's contacts are waiting. The IRS has been anonymously notified. We're just waiting for your signal." Friday, I decided during the anniversary dinner. Our 40th anniversary was in 2 weeks. Elijah had reserved the most exclusive restaurant in the city. He had invited our closest friends and family. It would be public. It would be devastating. It would be perfect. "Are you sure?" Jamal asked. "Once we start, there's no going back." I thought of Candace, unaware her husband was a bigamist, of Jalyn and little Sky, who would lose the father they knew. They were victims too, but I couldn't save them without destroying myself. I'm sure, I confirmed, 40 years of lies end on Friday. The restaurant, the Gilded Lyre, shimmered like a jewel in the city night. Elijah had reserved the entire main hall, an extravagant gesture, even for him. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light over Egyptian linen tablecloths, each table adorned with white orchids and red roses, the colors of my wedding bouquet 40 years ago. A string quartet played. Our love is here to stay, the song from our first dance. Every detail had been meticulously planned, a public masterpiece of romance that concealed private rot. I wore the blood-red dress I had bought specifically for this night, a daring design that hugged my figure, with a neckline Elijah would have considered inappropriate just a few months ago. My hair was styled in an elegant updo that revealed the diamond necklace my mother had left me, the one Elijah didn't know I had retrieved from the safe deposit box. The makeup was dramatic, red lipstick, smoky eyes, a mask of war disguised as glamour. Every guest who arrived commented on how radiant I looked. Never,